when your own flesh and blood leaves you collapsed on the floor, bleeding through your clothes while they toast to a fake success story, something deep inside you breaks. But it does not break in a way that makes you weak. It breaks like sharp glass, honing every single edge until you become the most dangerous person in the room. They thought I was completely ruined, standing there alone in the dark. They had no idea I was taking notes. If you have ever been written off, humiliated, or completely abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love and protect you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and buckle up. Today's story is a slow burn, highly calculated, and completely legal masterclass in absolute ruin. Let us get right into it. My name is Catherine, and for 31 years, I was the invisible glue holding the Sterling family together. I was an architect by trade, but not the flashy kind who gets interviewed in sleek design magazines or attends expensive galas. I was the draftsman behind the curtain. For 7 long and exhausting years, I worked 16-hour days at Sterling & Sons Architecture, the boutique firm my father, Arthur, had built on the back of my grandfather's modest legacy. When Arthur's eyesight began to fail 6 years ago, I quietly took over all the heavy lifting. I handled the complex structural calculations, the tricky zoning negotiations, and the brutal municipal building permits. I did it quietly. I did it for a modest salary that barely covered my basic monthly rent, truly believing that blood meant loyalty, and that loyalty would eventually be rewarded. My younger sister, Evelyn, was the exact opposite of me. Evelyn was 26 years old, possessed a blinding veneer white smile, and had never drawn a single load-bearing wall in her entire life. She was the self-proclaimed visionary of the family. She was the one who went to the long, expensive luncheons, drank scotch with city council members, and posted slick pictures on social media posing next to detailed blueprints that I had spent 90 long hours perfecting in a dark basement office. I did not care about the fame or the constant praise. I cared about the work itself, and I cared deeply about my husband, David, as we prepared for the arrival of our very first child after 3 excruciating, heartbreaking years of fertility treatments. Everything I did was to secure a safe future for my growing family, even if it meant letting Evelyn take all the public credit. The night everything completely disintegrated was a humid Tuesday in middle October. I was 32 years old, 36 weeks into my first pregnancy, and standing in my parents' dining room. Arthur was hosting a massive formal dinner party at his historic brownstone in downtown Boston. The guest list was packed with high-profile figures, including key real estate investors, the deputy mayor, and senior representatives from the Vanguard Group. The Vanguard Group was a massive commercial development firm looking to award a lucrative $12 million contract for the total revival of the city's waterfront district. Evelyn had spent weeks taking full credit for the entire pitch. In reality, I had spent 2 straight months sleeping on the office sofa, engineering a revolutionary modular timber design that cut material costs by 30% while vastly exceeding structural load standards. I arrived late to the party because I had stayed behind at the dark office to carefully print the physical scale models and bind the final technical documentation packages. As I walked into the crowded dining room, carrying 2 heavy aluminum transport cases, the first real contraction stopped me right in the middle of a sentence. I froze in my tracks, the heavy cases slipping an inch from my fingers. At first, I gripped the edge of the mahogany sideboard and tried to breathe through it. But then another one came, stronger, closer, and completely impossible to ignore. Cold sweat instantly saturated the collar of my dress shirt. I leaned heavily against the mahogany sideboard, a crystal decanter rattling loudly against my knuckles. I gasped for air, trying to speak through the agonizing pressure. I told the room that my contractions had started and that I needed help immediately. The entire room went quiet for barely a second, but not out of genuine concern for my health. It quieted out of pure, unadulterated irritation. My father glanced at me, deeply irritated that I had interrupted the celebration for my younger sister and her boyfriend. Arthur slowly lowered his glass of red wine. His eyes did not show panic or fatherly worry. They showed cold, simmering embarrassment. He stepped over to me quickly, his voice a low, vicious whisper so the Vanguard Group representatives near the fireplace would not hear. He told me to call a taxi or call emergency services, snapping that I should do whatever I needed to do. He hissed that he was busy with the family party so I should stop disturbing them. He squeezed my shoulder so hard his fingers dug into the bone, not to support my weight but to force me to stand upright. He warned me not to ruin an important evening. Nobody stood up to help. My mother kept quietly arranging plates on the table. My sister looked down at her polished nails, avoiding my eyes. The relatives around the table avoided my gaze completely, as though helping me would force them to admit what kind of family we had become. I asked one more time for someone to drive me to the hospital, which was barely 2 miles down the road. My father simply repeated that I should not ruin their big night. That was the exact moment when I stopped begging. I stood there alone, gasping for air, clutching my swelling stomach while another contraction nearly brought me to my knees. I realized in that precise, agonizing moment that to them I was never a daughter or a sister. I was merely an engine. And when an engine makes an inconvenient noise, you do not comfort it. You mute it and replace it. I did not scream. I did not cry. Instead, a strange, absolute stillness washed over my mind. The physical pain was still intense, but my panic vanished completely. I slowly pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My hands were trembling violently from physical shock, but my thumb was steady. I placed my phone face down on the dining table, pressed record, and let it capture every single word that followed. I captured my father telling the waitstaff to ensure I left through the alleyway so the investors would not see a distressed employee. Then I called for help myself. I walked out toward the front door into the freezing October night all by myself. I dragged my feet across the cold pavement, holding my side through each wave of pain, until I reached the street where the ambulance finally met me. I spent the next 3 days in the hospital, delivering my healthy baby girl and undergoing medical observation due to severe stress and exhaustion. Not a single member of the Sterling family came to visit my hospital room. My mother sent a brief, detached text message on the second day. She said she hoped I was resting, announced that Evelyn had successfully signed the preliminary letter of intent with the Vanguard Group, and instructed me to ensure the final technical CD files were uploaded to the company server by Monday morning. My husband, David, sat beside my hospital bed for hours, holding my pale hand while tears fell quietly onto the linoleum floor. He asked me if everything we had worked for was over. I looked at our newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in her crib, turned to David and told him that it was not over. In fact, we were just getting started. But from that moment on, we would never build another thing for them. The very next morning, I officially submitted my resignation to Sterling & Sons Architecture, effective immediately. I packed none of my old tools and took nothing that belonged to the business. But what Arthur and Evelyn completely failed to realize, because neither of them had bothered to read a legal contract in over a decade, was the precise ownership structure of the intellectual property. 7 years prior, when I first joined the firm fresh out of graduate school, Arthur had flatly refused to give me equity partnership. To compensate me without spending actual cash, he had allowed me to establish a separate wholly owned corporate entity called Aegis Design Group. Every single patent, structural calculation method, and proprietary modular software framework I had created over those 7 years was legally registered under Aegis. I had merely leased those patents to my father's firm for a token fee of $1 a year. And according to the explicit terms of that contract, the lease automatically terminated if my employment with the firm was severed for any reason whatsoever. Arthur had always assumed that Sterling & Sons owned everything I created. He had never checked the state filings. He believed that because my last name was on the sign outside the building, my brain belonged to his company. I did not raise my voice, nor did I make a grand dramatic scene. I simply instructed my attorney to quietly revoke every active patent license attached to their firm. 2 weeks later, Evelyn held a massive press conference right on the waterfront to officially unveil the final blueprints for the $12 million Vanguard project. She stood proudly in front of local news cameras, dressed in a custom-tailored suit, showing off giant foam board renderings of my modular timber design. The very next hour, my attorney delivered a formal cease and desist order, paired with a federal patent infringement injunction, directly to the executive board of the Vanguard Group and the City Licensing Bureau. The impact was instantaneous and devastating. Because Evelyn had publicly claimed that all structural calculations were fully completed and approved for construction, Vanguard's legal division immediately conducted a thorough audit of the project filings. They were shocked to discover that Sterling & Sons held zero legal rights to the core architectural framework. Without access to those patented calculations, the proposed waterfront building was physically impossible to construct within the promised budget, timeline, or safety guidelines. That evening, my personal phone rang 47 times. I did not answer a single call. I simply let the screen flash silently in the dark while I cradled my baby. Around midnight, a violent pounding rattled the front door of my suburban home. I looked through the security camera feed and saw my father standing in the pouring rain. His face was bright red, his tie was undone, and his hair was completely soaked. I opened the heavy door and stood tall on the threshold, holding myself with firm resolve. Arthur immediately began roaring at me. He asked if I was completely insane, screaming that the Vanguard Group had just frozen their retainer payment and was threatening to sue the firm for massive commercial fraud. He demanded to know what toxic files I had sent to their corporate inbox. I looked at him calmly and kept my voice at a low, measured tone. I told him that I had simply sent them the absolute truth, along with proof of legal ownership. Arthur began shaking with fury. He shouted that I had developed those designs while receiving a paycheck from his company. He yelled that he had fed me, housed me, and given me a career for over 30 years, claiming that I owed everything to the family name. I stepped closer to the doorway, looking directly into his eyes without a trace of warmth left in my soul. I told him that I had owed him my loyalty, and that I had paid that debt in full while going into labor on his dining room floor while he served scallops to strangers. I reminded him that he had explicitly instructed me not to ruin his dinner party. Then I told him very clearly that dinner was over. I stepped back and closed the door firmly in his face, turning the deadbolt while he continued to scream into the rain. Over the next 2 months, Sterling & Sons architecture spiraled into complete, uncontrollable disaster. Without my engineering credentials attached to their active accounts, the firm could not pass standard city safety inspections on 3 other major residential developments. Construction delays began to stack up rapidly. Subcontractors, terrified that they would never be paid, pulled their crews off the construction sites one by one. Daily financial penalties from the Vanguard Group contract began accruing at a staggering rate of $15,000 per day. Evelyn was completely out of her depth. She was fundamentally incapable of performing high-level structural trigonometry, yet she desperately tried to hire an outside engineering firm to reverse engineer my formulas. But my legal patents were completely watertight. Any attempt to modify the physical dimensions breached local fire regulations, and any attempt to copy the software framework violated federal copyright law. They were trapped in an inescapable iron vice created entirely by their own arrogance and ignorance. By early December, facing total corporate bankruptcy, a massive class action lawsuit from angry real estate investors, and potential criminal fraud charges regarding Evelyn's signed municipal affidavits, Arthur was forced into an emergency liquidation of all company assets. The firm's historical office building downtown, its heavy physical equipment, its active client directory, and its entire corporate identity were put up for auction on the bankruptcy court block to settle their mounting debts. On the freezing morning of the asset sale, Arthur and Evelyn sat at the defense table inside a sleek corporate conference room in downtown Boston. They were surrounded by exhausted, highly expensive bankruptcy lawyers. Arthur looked 20 years older than he had 2 months ago. His gray hair was unkempt, his tailored suit hung loosely on his frail frame, and his hands trembled visibly as he drank water from a small paper cup. Evelyn sat staring silently at her shoes, her arrogant, wealthy persona completely shattered. The court-appointed bankruptcy trustee stood at the front of the room and officially opened the bidding for the company's remaining core holdings. She announced that the opening bid for the real estate title, client files, and brand rights of Sterling & Sons was set at $500,000. Evelyn leaned over toward Arthur, whispering frantically. She suggested that if they could somehow buy back the physical office building, they could downsize the operation and eventually rebuild the business from scratch. Arthur lowered his head and answered in a broken, hoarse whisper. He revealed that the primary bank held a $1.2 million lien against the structure, and that they did not even have $50,000 left in liquid cash. The auctioneer looked around the quiet room, asking if anyone was willing to place the opening bid of $500,000. I quietly stood up from the very back row of the gallery. I was wearing a tailored charcoal suit, feeling healthy, strong, and completely focused. Standing beside me was my corporate legal counsel and my new primary financial partner, the managing director of Apex Capital. Apex had eagerly funded my new independent firm, Aegis Architecture, after thoroughly reviewing my legal patent portfolio and business strategy. I spoke clearly, stating my bid of $500,000. Arthur spun around in his chair so fast his paper cups spilled onto the table. His eyes bulged in utter shock as he saw me standing there. He shouted my name, demanding to know what I was doing in the court building. Another independent real estate speculator sitting nearby raised his hand and offered $700,000. Without a single second of hesitation, I raised my voice and bid $1 million. A heavy, breathless silence fell over the entire room. Arthur scrambled to his feet, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. He yelled an objection to the trustee, claiming that I was his biological daughter and that the situation represented a clear conflict of interest. He screamed to the court that I had stolen their intellectual property and was trying to ruin his life. The trustee did not even bother to look up from her legal paperwork. She coolly stated that the intellectual property in question had been officially verified as the sole property of Aegis Design Group weeks ago. She instructed my father to sit down immediately or face removal by the court bailiffs for disturbing the legal proceedings. She then confirmed that the leading bid stood at $1 million from Mrs. Catherine Sterling. No one else in the room made another offer. The auctioneer raised his wooden gavel, brought it down hard against the desk, and declared the assets officially sold to Aegis Architecture. 10 minutes later, the final property transfer documents were signed and stamped by the state official. I gathered my coat and walked out into the private carpeted hallway, where Arthur and Evelyn were waiting near the elevator doors. They were standing beside 3 cardboard boxes filled with their personal desk clutter. Arthur stepped into my path, his trembling voice filled with a painful mixture of rage and utter desperation. Tears finally began streaming down his deeply wrinkled cheeks. He choked out that I had completely destroyed my own family. He asked how I could do this to my own father, leaving them with absolutely nothing. He wept, saying that his primary residence was mortgaged to its maximum limit and that Evelyn's professional career was dead before it had even begun. He asked if this was what I truly wanted, to see my own blood ruined in front of the world. I stood directly in front of them, completely calm, holding the signed legal title to the historic building he had built his lifelong pride upon. I told him in a smooth, quiet tone that I had not destroyed them. I explained that he had built a fragile house out of paper and expected me to hold up the heavy roof forever while he kicked me in the ribs. I said that I had simply stepped outside the structure, and it had collapsed under its own weight. Evelyn stepped forward, trying to maintain a tough posture, but her eyes were wide with genuine terror. She asked what they were supposed to do now, raising his voice as she mentioned the $600,000 in personal financial guarantees she had signed for the failed Vanguard contracts. I slowly reached into my inner jacket pocket. For a fraction of a second, Evelyn flinched backward, clearly expecting me to pull out a legal summons or a court order. Instead, I pulled out a crisp, brand new $100 bill. I folded it neatly in half and held it out toward my younger sister. Evelyn stared at the money with disgust and asked what it was supposed to be for. I looked at her and delivered the exact same words my father had spoken to me while I went into labor on their dining room floor. I told her it was for a rideshare service or a taxi. I advised her to take it, leave through the side exit, and try her best not to make a scene on her way out. Evelyn's jaw dropped in total shock. The deep psychological blow hit my father at the exact same second. He instantly recognized the precise phrase he had used while I stood crippled in pain in his home. The realization that their own cold words had returned to destroy them was absolute. Neither of them reached out to take the bill. I opened my hand and let the money drop gently through the air. It fluttered down silently, landing right on top of Evelyn's box of desk items. I turned my back on them without another word. I stepped into the private elevator reserved exclusively for the building's new owner, pushed the button for the top-floor penthouse office, and watched the heavy doors slide shut. Today, Aegis Architecture operates directly out of that very same downtown brownstone building. The heavy bronze sign on the exterior wall no longer reads Sterling & Sons. It bears a single elegant emblem depicting a solid shield. People often repeat the classic phrase that blood is thicker than water. But almost everyone forgets the full original meaning of that ancient saying. The blood of the covenant is far thicker than the water of the womb. Loyalty is never an automatic birthright just because you share a surname. Loyalty is an investment that must be earned every single day. And if you bleed the very people who keep you alive, you should never be surprised when you eventually end up dying of thirst. If that ending gave you absolute chills, do me a huge favor right now. Smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and tell me about the most calculated, deserved moment of justice you have ever witnessed. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications so you never miss another story. Until next time, stay sharp and take care of yourselves.